He'd spent a lifetime building things that dazzled the world, skyscrapers that pierced clouded skies, companies that dominated industry rankings, and a reputation for precision and excellence that left even competitors admiring from afar. Somewhere, among contracts and board meetings and gala speeches, he had somehow convinced himself that his greatest contributions were those big, bold, headline-making achievements. And yet, today, as he walked into the grand hall of the charity Christmas dinner with his daughter by his side, he felt something different, a weight in his chest he couldn't quite explain, a quiet tension beneath the surface of the polished evening. His daughter, Clara, was 9 years old and small for her age, with wide eyes that flickered with curiosity but also another truth she didn't speak. Not with her voice, at least. Clara was deaf, and though sign language was her bridge to the world, most around her didn't understand that language, didn't care to learn it, and therefore treated her as if she were invisible. He knew this intellectually, he knew the facts, but standing beside her now, hearing polite greetings from guests who smiled warmly yet spoke loudly directly into his ears if she wasn't present, he suddenly understood what invisibility felt like. When he had arrived at the event, guests had parted politely for him, offered congratulatory nods and handshakes expecting him to spend the night networking. They did not, however, offer so much as a glance to the quiet girl beside him who watched lights sparkle and faces grin but could not hear a single word spoken. The event was lavish, warm, rich with laughter and festive music, and yet there was an undercurrent of discomfort in Clara's posture, the subtle tenseness of someone surrounded by a sound she could not understand. He noticed it, but he didn't confront it until they were seated at their table and the moment felt impossibly heavy. Clara had tried writing notes, drawing simple pictures, anything to express that she felt alone among a sea of people who politely ignored her presence, and only then did he realize how alone she truly might feel. He looked around the table, saw guests chatting, raising glasses, toasting causes, exchanging pleasantries. A few glanced at Clara, offering sympathetic smiles or gentle nods, but none truly engaged with her. They seemed gracious in appearance yet emotionally distant, as if acknowledging someone's disability was enough, without actually caring to connect. He felt a strange shame stir in his chest, because he himself had been guilty of similar inattentiveness before. He had hired tutors and specialists, ensured Clara had every resource she needed, and yet he hadn't made room in his own heart to meet her world as fully as she had met his. The band played a holiday melody, and Clara watched the musicians with intense interest, her eyes following the conductor's hands as they rose and fell, directing rhythm and tempo with elegance. She wanted to be swept up in the moment, but the world around her felt loud in a way it never had for him, a crowded theater of gestures and sounds she could not translate without help. That help arrived in the form of a man in a crisp white apron and warm eyes, a newcomer at the event who seemed to glide uneasily among the guests. He was a server, someone unremarkable at first glance, yet his presence became extraordinary in an instant as he approached their table, not with routine professionalism, but with something deeper, a sensitivity that shifted the atmosphere entirely. As he set the breadbasket in front of Clara, his gaze met hers with a gentle softness, neither presumptuous nor dissonant. There was something in his expression that suggested awareness, not just courtesy. When Clara tried to smile, conferencing back toward her father, he saw her hesitation, that silent longing to be included. "Does she use sign language?" the man asked, without preamble, his voice soft but clear, as though he already knew the answer. The father blinked, surprised. He had spent so long orchestrating things outwardly that he hadn't listened to the way his daughter's eyes lit up when she communicated in ways he rarely practiced himself. "Yes," he said quietly, almost embarrassed by how little he'd participated in that language of her world without hesitation. The man shifted his stance, facing Clara directly. He raised his hands with an ease and fluidity that immediately captured her attention, signing slowly at first, then with natural rhythm as Clara's eyes widened with recognition and delight. Within moments, she returned his signs with confidence, her smile broadening. The difference in the room was immediate. Conversations continued around them, but this exchange existed in its own quiet bubble, an intimacy of understanding that rippled outward. It drew the glances of other guests, first curious, then respectful, as Clara laughed silently with her new friend, signing stories that he seemed to intuitively grasp. Her father watched it all with a swelling in his chest he had not expected. In that moment he saw two truths. One was how deeply his daughter's spirit longed to be understood, and the other was how profoundly meaningful it could be when someone stepped beyond polite recognition and chose genuine connection. The server's name was James, and as the evening unfolded, he continued to check on them occasionally, finding ways to include Clara in the festivities, nudging conversation toward topics she could join, summarizing jokes in sign language so she wouldn't feel excluded, and cheering gently when she responded with witty signs of her own. The father found himself leaning forward, learning a few signs on the fly, awkwardly at first, but with a sincerity that warmed them both. Clara looked at him, then not with the guarded patience of a child accustomed to being sidelined, but with an open eagerness he hadn't seen before, a sign of longing finally acknowledged. As the dinner progressed, guests began to notice the connection forming at that table. They watched not out of curiosity but admiration as Clara's laughter filled space with a cheer that was both quiet and contagious. Someone directed a toast toward the father, a celebration of his business contributions, but his attention wasn't on the glass race in his honor. His gaze was fixed on his daughter as she signed with James and then turned toward him, eager for him to respond. He lifted his hand slowly, deliberately mimicking the signs he had learned over the past. Our joy, family, together, and though imperfect, the effort made Clara's face shine with pride deeper than any praise he had ever received in his corporate life. He felt an unfamiliar trembling of emotion, a mixture of love and regret for the time he'd spent focusing outward while missing the inward beauty of knowing his daughter truly. Something shifted in the room after that. The other guests began to engage too, attempting simple signs, turning toward Clara with warmth, laughing as they learned new phrases. It wasn't showy or forced. It was genuine, a likeness born of shared humanity rather than social convention. With a Christmas dinner, once a perfunctory event of networking and prestige, transformed into a gathering of authentic connection. People spoke in softer tones, looked past luxury and status, and saw Clara not as a silent observer to be pitied or ignored, but as a vibrant human being deserving of connection. By the time dessert was served, warm bread pudding with spice and berry compote, Clara had become the unofficial heart of the event. People gathered politely around their table, asking her questions, using sign language apps on phones, or simply listening as she responded through gestures they now attempted to mirror. The father watched his daughter shine and felt his own walls dissolve in a way his achievements never had. When the event finally wound down and guests prepared to leave, James approached their table once last time. He signed gently, "You bring joy wherever you go." Clara's smile was radiant. Her father felt a surge of gratitude not just for James, but for the shift he had catalyzed within the father's own heart. Later that night, as they walked out into the cool air and the glittering lights of the city beyond, Clara slipped her small hand into her father's, without speaking. Because speech was often unnecessary, they communicated in a harmony that went deeper than words. He realized then that empathy, the ability to meet someone where they were, was the most profound gift he could offer. He reached up, signing clumsily but sincerely, "Proud of you." Clara's eyes softened with joy. Her smile whispered back, "Thank you." For the first time, he truly understood her world, not just through sign language, but through the meaningful effort it took to connect. As he tucked her into bed later that night, he lingered by her door, watching her drift into sleep with a serenity that came from having been seen and heard in a way she deserved. He thought about the charity dinner, about how one unexpected act of understanding had, where it changed not just the tone of an evening, but his own heart. He thought about how simple it had been, and yet how transformative to truly see someone, to meet them in their language, to honor their presence with undivided attention. He promised himself he would keep learning, keep signing, keep reaching out, keep inviting her world into his own more fully, because success, he now understood, wasn't measured in accolades or wealth, but in the depth of connection you forged with the people you loved. And in Clara's smile that night, he found something far greater than anything his vast life of achievements had ever given him, a lesson in humanity that would guide every choice he made from then on. Please like, share, and subscribe. LoveraSky. We share stories the world need to feel again.